So this is a little special concept, and I'm very excited to unpack this and see what becomes of it. For for generations, for as long as we can remember, Jews have been viewed by their home countries as different. Some situations, second-class citizens. I don't think today that's true in most places. For most of Jewish history, Jews were not granted most of the rights that regular citizens of their countries were given. But in the United States and in Canada and in many Western countries, Jews have been accepted as part of the fabric that makes up the country. I'll give you an example. In America, Jews have as many rights under the Constitution as any other citizen. In Canada, the same. In America, Jews are so much part of the country that they've even run for the highest offices. This is something unheard of. That there was a Jew that ran for vice presidency, or that there's the Democratic leader of the House is Jewish. It's unheard of in previous generations. Many of our grandparents put it best. They said, America is the golden Medina, the golden country. And Jews live and have lived for many years a blessed life among the wonderful peoples that make up the population. And Jews have enjoyed that to a certain extent, that privilege. But, and we see this now a lot more over the past year, we're not completely the same as our neighbors. We're different. And it's very hard to live somewhat of a assimilated or secular life and then be challenged with this idea that I may not be the same as my neighbors. At least to me, I'm the same as my neighbors, but to my neighbors, they don't see me as the same. And it's interesting, and I'm thinking about a particular challenge someone that I know is going through right now. And it's not last week they were going through the challenge and not next week, but the great challenge is this week. And I think I always look in any given time, I open the Torah portion and I say, the Torah portion, it's this week, not next week, and not last week. So what does this week's Torah portion have to say about this challenge? This week, we open the Torah, and Abraham demonstrates to us how to relate to nations who accept us as equal. At the beginning of the Torah portion, Sarah passes away, and Abraham wants to purchase a plot of land from he goes to this Ephron, and he goes to these people, and they're willing to give him a burial spot for free. They say, take it. But Abraham insisted on properly purchasing the land for his wife's grave, saying, I am a stranger and an inhabitant within you. Think about it. Why does he insist on paying for it? Because Abraham says, I inhabit, I'm a citizen. I inhabit this land, but I'm also a stranger. Right there, at that moment, when he buys the cave of Machpelah, Abraham categorized the essence of a Jew in this world, that we're full of inhibitions, that we are not sure that we are inhabitants of this world, yet we're strangers. We inhabit this world, we inhabit this land, yet we're strangers in it. Just think about that. On the one hand, we're inhabitants of this country in every sense of the word. We're involved in the country's politics. I know so many Jews who recently, myself included, exercised their civil duty and voted. We're so involved in politics. Thank you. In government. And we're as involved as our non-Jewish countrymen. We do business with our non-Jewish neighbors. We go to the same universities. We speak the same language without an accent. Maybe our previous generations, they spoke with an accent. Today, we don't speak with an accent. We speak the same language. If you didn't know better, we all were raised in this environment. We're even prepared to stand right alongside our non-Jewish neighbors and sacrifice our lives defending our country. So many Jews have gone to the army, to the Navy, to the military, to the Air Force. Yet, still, and it's a challenge that we've seen this year for the first major challenge, I would say, that we've seen in our lifetime. People who are visibly Jewish have noticed it maybe more nuanced before this, but people who are more secular or more assimilated, this is the first great challenge of their lifetime, that we're total strangers to the people, to our neighbors. We are of a world that is completely strange to them. And we live in a world that, and come from a world that is just different. And we thought that we were all the same, but it seems that we're not, and not in our eyes, in their eyes. Let's talk about Judaism. Let's talk about philosophy for a second. We live in a world of firm belief in a creator with a strange tradition and a different set of values. To a certain extent, we live our lives differently. We pray differently. We eat different foods. We celebrate different holidays. A lot of people today, instead of saying, Merry something, they will say Happy Holidays. And that has a lot to do with us. So when it came to the burial, which is part of that spiritual world of which our neighbors have no understanding, we do our burial very different. Abraham says to the Hittites, sell me a separate burial plot so I may bury my dead. Now, the Hittites couldn't understand why Abraham was talking about differences, about separations. That they wanted Abraham to feel at home among them, as one of them. They wanted him to bury his wife the way they buried theirs. So they said, you are a prince of God in our midst. You may choose even the best of our grave sites for your wife. And even if you choose a plot that is already reserved, no one will stop you from burying her there. Think about that. Yet, all of their courtesy does not cause Abraham to sway. He insisted on buying the Machpelah cave. He insisted because he wanted to demonstrate that although in certain ways Jews are one with our neighbors, when it comes to anything that is part of our spiritual world, including death and life after death, we're completely strangers to them. We're a different breed. There's another display of this concept a bit later in the Parsha. a bit later in the portion. When Eliezer arrives at the outskirts of the town of Aram Naharaim, that is where Abraham told his servant Eliezer to take a bride for his son Isaac, from Aram Naharaim. Eliezer makes his camels kneel beside the well, where the daughters of the townspeople came to draw water for their families. I don't know if you know this, but back in the day, it was a thing. You met at the well, saw you at the well. It was a thing. Unfortunately, indoor plumbing created that situation where we are once again more separated from our neighbors. Otherwise, we'd all be going to the well together. So he goes to the well, and then he prays to God, and he says, "Let it be that the girl to whom I will say, 'Please tip over your jug so I can drink,' will say, 'Drink, and I will also water your camels.' And that's the one you have designated for your servant Isaac." Now, I want to just tell you, side point, if a single came to me and said that I will only accept a woman to whom, when I ask her for a drink, she says, "And I'll also water your camels," which in metaphor, I'm saying is like a very specific ask. There are people who are looking for their soulmate and they have very specific asks, but this is a very specific ask. I think it's a little bit crazy. And Rashi, who's the super commentary on the Torah, he explains that Eliezer specifically chose this sign because he recognized that only a woman of tremendous kindness could permit and be permitted to join Abraham's household. That what he was looking for was not just kind. He was looking for someone of tremendous kindness. That God heard Eliezer's prayer, and the miracle unfolded as the very first girl that he asked responded exactly as Eliezer had prayed she would. When Eliezer brought her home to Isaac, he related to Isaac all the miracles that had been done for him in order to convince Isaac that kindness, the sign that he had chosen, was true proof that this girl was meant for him. And Isaac brought her to the tent of Sarah, his mother. This is what the Torah says. And Rashi explains that Isaac actually brought Rebekah to the tent, and she was just like Sarah, his mother, who had just passed away. Think of that connection. So as long as Sarah was alive, for example, this is what Rashi explains, a candle burned from one Sabbath, the candle she lit before Shabbat, it burned from one Sabbath eve to the next. And a blessing was found in the dough, and a cloud was attached to the tent. And when she died, Sarah, all these things ceased. And when Rebekah arrived, all of a sudden, all of the special blessings around Sarah resumed. When Isaac saw this, that was it. He took Rebekah, she became his wife, and he loved her. Now, here's my question. Why did Isaac have to see these miracles before agreeing to marry Rebekah? Why was the sign of kindness that Eliezer had chosen not good enough for him? I mean, it's insane. The story is insane. If somebody gave me that ask, I would say you're a little bit out to lunch. And it worked. And he brings her. It's like obvious. This is literally Bashert. This is literally soulmates. Why was that not good enough? Why did he have to see the miracles? And here, I think, again, we see the difference between inhabitant and stranger. The inhabitant side of the Jew and the stranger side of the Jew. Eliezer was an outsider. So therefore, what he as an outsider saw in Abraham, the kindness, that's what he looked for in the potential bride. So that she might fit in with the family, because that's what he saw. He was a servant, he was an outsider. But Isaac was looking for something else in the woman he would marry. Isaac was looking for the stranger in her. Kindness wasn't enough for him. He wanted a special spirituality. He wasn't satisfied with a woman who did good deeds for other people. He wanted a woman who had a relationship with God. He wanted to know what her connection to God was and what it was about. He found his answer in the cloud of glory and in the Shabbat candles. That only when he had established her credentials as a stranger to the non Jewish world did he accept her as a suitable member of his father's household. And this is really the juxtaposition of our lives, the inhabitant versus the stranger. We're constantly challenged. When our grandparents or our parents came to this country, they were complete strangers in the literal sense. They were seen as immigrants, griners, they called them, newcomers. And that's how they felt about themselves too. And so they did everything in their power to blend in, to become integrated among the inhabitants. The problem is, at least I think this, that they were too successful. They became so integrated that they forgot about being strangers. They forgot what Abraham had remembered. Yes, he was integrated, but he wasn't a Hittite. He was a stranger. And I think that, especially now more than ever, because I don't think there's going back after this year. I think that the it's all out. There's no going back. And the mission of this generation, of our generation, that is really, really become blended, really become integrated. We speak the language without any fault. We are educated in the same mannerisms as our neighbors. We are living, shopping, eating, experiencing life just like our neighbors. And so our challenge is to reinstate ourselves in the stranger category. They've reminded us this. And so even though we don't want to accept it, because it's hard when you integrate and that's what our parents wanted for us. But it's our responsibility now and our understanding now that we have to constantly remind ourselves and we have to teach the next generation that we're strangers also, that there's a difference. We have different traditions, we have different holidays, we have different feelings towards various things, and we have different feelings towards a higher spiritual world. And I don't think it's a bad thing. I think that to a certain extent, I know that there's a certain sense of sadness that comes along with it because we all were living in this relative peace for all these years. So I think there's a certain level of sadness, but there's also, I think, an understanding that this is a reality and one that we forgot about and that we now have to bring back into our life. And we have to remember, and I don't want to say it's unfortunate. It's the reality. You can say it's unfortunate because we have had this veil of security for all these years, but it really wasn't. I mean, I can tell you, growing up in Chicago, the amount of one of the things that came out not long ago is this person who was shot at walking the synagogue in the neighborhood that I grew up in, and when I was 14 years old, I was playing basketball with a bunch of friends, and I wore a kippah, I looked visibly Jewish, and somebody came in and stuck a gun to my head and said Hitler should have finished you off. And so this is a reality that I've known for a lot longer than this year. And there's other elements. I was walking the synagogue when I was 16 in Rogers Park in Chicago, and there was a white supremacist that was going around shooting. I saw him get out of his car and shoot my friend. Thank God survived. Had to have a number of surgeries, but survived. And he went around that night and shot quite a number of people. And I'm telling you these stories not because I want to intensify what's going on in the world. What I'm saying is that for many people, I have not been one of those, but for many people, there has been this veil of security that has existed. And now I don't think that yes, we mourn the sadness of what we thought was, but it never really was. And so what I say to you, my blessing to you, is that it's okay. It's okay to be inhabitants and also to be strangers. And like Abraham in this week's Torah portion, it's okay to remember that we are strangers and to be able to navigate the world like that, to look out for one another and to it's not to blame it on our neighbors, but to let the reality of our lives sink in, and that we should have the blessing to be able to live within this world, but to rise above it.